Have you ever wished you could speak English so effortlessly that words simply tumble out without a second thought? If you found yourself trapped in that familiar cycle of endless study sessions, whilst genuine conversation remains frustratingly elusive, you're certainly not alone. However, here's what I want you to know: it absolutely doesn't have to remain this way. Today, I'm going to reveal precisely how you can shatter that invisible barrier and begin speaking with greater confidence, speed, and natural flow than you've ever imagined possible. Let's unlock your true English potential, starting right now. Hello, everyone. Today, I want to discuss something rather crucial: how you can transform your English speaking abilities beyond anything you've achieved before. If you've ever felt completely stuck, as though no matter how diligently you study, speaking still feels like climbing Mount Everest, you're amongst countless others who share this experience. But here's the brilliant news: improvement is absolutely within your grasp, and it needn't take decades to achieve. In fact, with the proper techniques, you can begin speaking more naturally almost immediately. The beginning of your transformation journey starts with understanding what truly separates fluent speakers from those still finding their feet. It's not that fluent speakers possess encyclopedic vocabularies or never stumble over words. Quite the contrary, they make mistakes constantly. The genuine difference lies in their confidence. Fluent speakers possess unwavering confidence in their ability to communicate, even when they can't recall specific words or grammar rules. They don't freeze solid when a word escapes them. Instead, they press on regardless, and that's precisely what creates the illusion of perfect fluency. Picture this scenario: you're engaged in conversation, and words flow like a gentle stream. You're not consciously thinking about grammatical structures or hesitating over word choices. You're simply speaking. That's the destination we're aiming for. But how does one actually arrive there? Let me share something that might genuinely surprise you. Tiny adjustments in your practice methods can yield extraordinary results. You don't need to revolutionize your entire study routine or memorize thousands of additional vocabulary items. What you require are several straightforward techniques that will enable you to speak with genuine confidence. So, what's the initial step? It's constructing the fundamental foundation of fluency, which begins with confidence. Without feeling confident, speaking well becomes remarkably challenging. However, confidence isn't something you're born possessing, it's something you deliberately cultivate. And I'm about to demonstrate exactly how. Here's an absolute truth: anyone can speak considerably better than they currently do, regardless of their present level. If you've struggled with English or felt terrified of speaking aloud, this guide is specifically designed for you. We'll progress methodically, breaking down the entire process into manageable techniques you can implement today. By the end, you'll be speaking English with more confidence than ever before. Before we explore these techniques, let's examine why confidence matters so tremendously. When you feel confident, you're not paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. You speak freely, and even when things go awry, you learn from the experience. Each time you practice speaking, you're building not merely language skills, but also genuine confidence. Here's a quote I absolutely adore from Winston Churchill: "Success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." This rings especially true regarding English speaking. The more frequently you speak, the more confident you become, and consequently, your fluency improves dramatically. Now, I know what you're thinking, but what if I don't feel confident yet? Don't worry in the slightest, that's completely normal. Confidence develops through action. The more you speak, the better you become, and the more confident you feel naturally. Let me offer you a small challenge to begin. Set a goal to speak English daily, even if it's merely for 5 minutes. You can practice with friends, family members, or even by yourself. The crucial element is to start speaking, even if it feels rather uncomfortable initially. Throughout the following sections, we'll break down exactly how you can build confidence and enhance your speaking abilities. We'll cover listening techniques, shadowing methods, repetition strategies, and even some entertaining ways to practice. Remember, it's not about achieving perfection, it's about making consistent progress. But there's one particular technique that will genuinely help you take that first significant leap towards fluency. It's something most learners completely overlook, yet it's the secret to improving faster than you might think possible. Now that we've established the importance of building confidence, let's delve into the first key technique that will truly revolutionize your speaking abilities: active listening. You might assume that speaking fluently is entirely about talking, but here's the truth: you cannot speak well unless you listen exceptionally well. Listening forms the absolute foundation of fluency. Consider this carefully. When you listen attentively, you're not simply hearing individual words. You're absorbing how sentences flow naturally, how native speakers connect their ideas seamlessly, and how specific words are actually pronounced in context. When you master listening skills, you'll discover that speaking becomes considerably easier and more intuitive. It's rather like filling your brain with the proper tools before beginning construction. However, not just any listening will suffice. You need to practice what's called active listening. This means genuinely paying attention to what you hear rather than letting words simply wash over you. You focus intently on them, break them down systematically, and absorb how they are used in natural context. Here's a practical example. When you're listening to a podcast, story, or even casual conversation, pay careful attention to how the speaker structures their sentences. Are they using short, punchy phrases or lengthy, complex sentences? How do they pronounce particular words? How do they express their ideas clearly? Active listening means noticing these subtle details and learning from them consistently. One of the most effective ways to practice active listening is through a technique called shadowing. Shadowing involves listening to a speaker and immediately repeating what they say, almost like being their linguistic shadow, following their words as closely as possible. This represents a powerful method for improving both listening and speaking simultaneously. Here's how you can practice shadowing effectively. First, choose a suitable podcast or story. Select something that's not excessively long or difficult. You can find excellent stories and podcasts for beginners on various platforms. Second, listen carefully by starting with a short sentence or phrase, paying close attention to the speaker's rhythm, tone, and pronunciation. Third, pause and repeat as soon as the speaker finishes a sentence. Pause the audio and repeat what they said, attempting to match their speed and intonation as closely as possible. Fourth, continue this process for several minutes each day. You'll notice that your pronunciation and fluency improve gradually over time. Shadowing helps you become accustomed to speaking without overthinking every word. You're not translating concepts in your head, you're simply repeating what you hear naturally. This builds fluency organically and effectively. But let me tell you something rather important. Don't worry about being absolutely perfect. When you're shadowing, you're going to make mistakes. Perhaps you'll miss a word or mispronounce something. That's perfectly acceptable. The goal isn't perfection, the goal is becoming comfortable speaking without hesitation. The more frequently you shadow, the more fluent you'll naturally become. One of my students, Sarah, was incredibly shy about speaking English. She was terrified of making mistakes, so she rarely spoke at all. I introduced her to shadowing, and it completely transformed her approach. She began practicing by repeating sentences from podcasts. Initially, she struggled considerably, but after several weeks, she noticed that her sentences flowed much more easily. Shadowing helped her build genuine confidence, and soon she was speaking without any fear whatsoever. Here's a brilliant quote by Stephen Covey that fits perfectly here. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. Active listening teaches you to truly understand, and when you understand, speaking becomes considerably easier. But here's where things become particularly interesting. Active listening and shadowing are merely the beginning. There's another technique that will help you advance your fluency even further, and it's all about the power of repetition. We've already discussed the tremendous power of active listening and shadowing techniques. Now, let's explore a technique that may sound deceptively simple, but is incredibly effective: repetition. You might wonder why repeating things is so tremendously important. The answer is straightforward: repetition is how your brain learns to speak fluently without any hesitation whatsoever. Think of it this way: when you repeat words and phrases consistently, you're training your brain to recall them instantly. The more you repeat, the more natural the words feel, and eventually you'll be able to say them without any conscious thought. It's rather like learning to ride a bicycle or memorizing your favorite song you practiced over and over until it became second nature. Speaking English follows exactly the same principle. Here's something fascinating. Fluency isn't simply about knowing an enormous vocabulary. It's about being able to use the words you already know quickly and effortlessly. Repetition helps you reach that magical point where you don't have to pause and think about grammar or vocabulary choices. You simply speak naturally. Let me share a story about one of my students, Paul. Paul possessed extensive English vocabulary, but he frequently hesitated when speaking because he had to think carefully about what to say next. I introduced him to the repetition technique, and the results were remarkable. Every day, Paul would select 5 common English phrases and repeat each one 5 times. It seemed rather tedious initially, but after a week, Paul noticed something absolutely amazing. He could say those phrases easily and without any hesitation. Repetition had worked its magic completely. So, how can you use repetition to improve your speaking abilities? Let's break it down systematically. First, repeat common phrases by starting with expressions you use frequently, such as "How are you?" or "What's your name?" Repeat these phrases aloud multiple times. This helps your brain become accustomed to saying them quickly and naturally. You can do this whilst walking, cooking, or even whilst looking in a mirror. The goal is to make these phrases feel completely natural. Second, use the mirror technique, which is a brilliant way to practice repetition. Stand in front of a mirror and say the same sentence 5 times. Watch your mouth movements carefully, focus on your pronunciation, and become comfortable seeing yourself speak English. This technique not only improves your fluency, but also builds confidence, because it's like practicing with another person. Third, combine shadowing with repetition for double the impact. Remember shadowing from our previous discussion. You can combine shadowing with repetition for extraordinary results. When you shadow a podcast or story, repeat the sentences as closely as possible to the original speaker. Then, after you've shadowed several sentences, repeat those sentences again independently. This is where repetition truly shines. It transforms what you hear into what you can easily say yourself. When you shadow a podcast or story, repeat the sentences as closely as possible to the original speaker. Then, after you've shadowed several sentences, repeat those sentences again independently. This is where repetition truly shines. It transforms what you hear into what you can easily say yourself. A quote by Aristotle explains this perfectly: "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Repeating phrases, sentences, and words transforms speaking English into a genuine habit, and that habit leads directly to fluency. Fourth, record yourself speaking. Another excellent way to practice repetition is by recording yourself. Choose a short passage from a podcast or story. You can find plenty of suitable material on various platforms. Read it aloud, record yourself speaking, Then listen to the recording and repeat the sentences again. This not only helps with fluency, but also allows you to hear your own progress over time. You'll notice that you sound increasingly natural and fluent. Fifth, remember that small steps lead to significant progress. You don't have to repeat lengthy paragraphs or complex phrases. Start small by picking simple sentences like, "I'm going to the shops," "I enjoy reading books," or "Can you help me?" Practice them daily without fail. Small, consistent practice will lead to substantial improvements in your fluency. One crucial thing to remember is that repetition doesn't mean being boring. Yes, you're repeating the same phrases, but you can add variety by using different contexts. For example, practice the same sentence in the morning, then again in the evening, but this time pretend you're in a completely different situation, perhaps talking to a friend or ordering food at a restaurant. There's another reason repetition is so remarkably powerful. It helps you build genuine confidence. The more you repeat something, the more comfortable you feel saying it. When you're comfortable, you speak without fear. The hesitation disappears completely, and your words begin to flow naturally. But here's the exciting part. Repetition is merely one piece of the puzzle. Next, we'll discuss how to make practice genuinely enjoyable. You'll learn how to transform speaking English into something you genuinely look forward to every day, rather than something that feels like tedious work. Speaking English doesn't have to feel like an enormous chore. In fact, the more enjoyable your practice sessions, the faster you'll improve overall. When learning becomes genuinely fun, you naturally want to do it more frequently. This section is entirely about transforming your English practice into something you genuinely anticipate every single day. Imagine this scenario. Instead of forcing yourself to sit down and study reluctantly, you actually enjoy speaking English. It's not about studying complex grammar rules or memorizing endless word lists. It's about having genuine fun and feeling excited to use what you've learned. But how do you make practice genuinely entertaining? Let's explore several techniques that will transform your speaking practice into an activity you absolutely love. First, try role-playing to step into real conversations. One of the most effective ways to make speaking English enjoyable is through role-playing scenarios. This is where you act out different situations as if you're actually there. You can pretend to be ordering coffee at a cafe, having a job interview, or meeting new friends at a party. Through role-playing, you're practicing real-life conversations in a low-pressure, enjoyable environment. Here's how you can start. Pick a realistic situation by thinking of a common scenario where you might need to speak English, such as asking for directions or ordering food. Create a dialogue by writing down several sentences you might need to say in that situation. Act it out either alone or with a friend, pretending you're in the actual place and using the sentences you've prepared. The brilliant thing about role-playing is that it helps you become comfortable with everyday phrases and situations. Plus, it feels more like acting than studying, making it considerably more enjoyable. One of my students, Anna, used to feel incredibly bored practicing English by herself. I introduced her to role-playing, and suddenly her practice sessions became genuinely exciting. She would imagine herself traveling, ordering food, and meeting new people, all whilst practicing English. Over time, her speaking skills improved dramatically, and she didn't even realize she was studying. Second, talk about what you absolutely love. Another excellent way to make practice fun is by discussing your passions. Think about something you genuinely love, whether it's a hobby, sport, favorite film, or book. When you talk about things that truly interest you, words come more easily, and you're more motivated to continue speaking. For example, if you love cooking, try discussing your favorite recipes in English. Describe how to make your favorite dish, or pretend you're teaching someone to cook. The key is selecting a topic that genuinely excites you, so you'll feel more engaged whilst practicing. Here's a brilliant quote by Albert Einstein: "Creativity is intelligence having fun." When you practice speaking about things you love, you're using your creativity, making the process both more enjoyable and more effective. Third, play speaking games. Who said language learning can't be a game? There are loads of speaking games you can play either by yourself or with a partner. These games challenge you to think and speak in English whilst being fun and light-hearted. Fourth, practice with podcasts and stories. Another excellent way to keep practice entertaining is by using podcasts and stories. Listening to stories and podcasts not only improves your listening skills, but also provides brilliant material to discuss. After listening, try summarizing the story in your own words or discussing it with a friend. You can find numerous excellent stories and podcasts designed to help learners improve their English. Choose a topic that interests you, listen to the story, then practice speaking about it. This way, you're learning from engaging content whilst practicing your speaking skills simultaneously. One of my students, Tom, struggled with staying motivated to practice speaking. However, once he began listening to podcasts about his favorite topics like technology and travel, he found that speaking about them came naturally. He would listen to an episode, then practice explaining it to himself or others, making his practice both effective and genuinely enjoyable. Fifth, change your environment regularly. Sometimes a change in your practice environment can make things more exciting. Instead of sitting at a desk, try practicing in different locations. Go for a walk and describe what you see in English. Sit in a cafe and pretend you're having a conversation with the barista. The idea is to bring your practice into the real world. By changing where you practice, you keep things fresh and interesting. Plus, practicing in real-life environments helps you become comfortable speaking English in everyday situations. Sixth, celebrate your progress consistently. Don't forget to celebrate your victories, no matter how small they might seem. Did you speak in English for 5 minutes without stopping? Did you successfully role-play a conversation? Celebrate that achievement. Recognizing your progress is a brilliant way to stay motivated and continue practicing. A famous quote by B.F. Skinner says, "A person who feels appreciated will always do more than what is expected." This applies to yourself as well. The more you appreciate your own progress, the more motivated you'll be to continue improving. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds brilliant, but what if I hit a wall? What if I feel completely stuck? Don't worry in the slightest, that's completely normal. Next, we'll discuss breaking through those speaking blocks and how to keep moving forward even when it feels particularly challenging. So far, you've learned how to make English practice enjoyable with role-playing, speaking games, and podcasts. But what happens when you feel completely stuck? When words simply refuse to emerge, and you're terrified of making mistakes. These speaking blocks are entirely normal, and every learner experiences them. The key is understanding how to break through them effectively. Let's begin by recognizing one crucial fact. Making mistakes is an integral part of the learning process. One of the biggest reasons people feel blocked is the fear of saying something wrong. But here's a secret. Even native speakers make mistakes constantly. What truly matters is that you continue speaking. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become, and the easier it will be to push through those blocks. First, overcome the fear of mistakes completely. Imagine you're having a conversation, and suddenly you forget a word or say something incorrectly. What do? Most people freeze up entirely or stop speaking altogether. But here's what you should do instead. Keep talking regardless. Don't worry about getting every single word right. just focus on communicating your message clearly. If you can't remember a specific word, describe it using different words instead. Most importantly, stay in the conversation. The crucial thing is to continue, regardless of minor errors. Let me tell you about one of my students, Daniel. He was so worried about making mistakes that he would freeze completely whenever he attempted to speak English. I told him that mistakes are not failures, they are valuable opportunities to learn. We worked on building his confidence by practicing simple conversations, and I encouraged him to continue speaking even when he wasn't sure of the right words. Over time, Daniel learned that the more he spoke, the more his confidence grew, and the less those mistakes bothered him. There's a famous quote by Henry Ford that says, "Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently." Every time you make a mistake, you're learning how to speak better the next time. Second, use self-talk to break through barriers. When you don't have anyone to practice with, self-talk can be your best tool for breaking through speaking blocks. This technique is simple but remarkably powerful. All you need to do is talk to yourself in English aloud as if you're having a genuine conversation. You can do this whilst doing daily tasks like cooking, walking, or getting ready for bed. Here's how self-talk works effectively. Describe your day by talking about what you did today, where you went, or what you plan to do tomorrow. Ask yourself questions such as, "What do I want to eat for dinner?" Then answer in English. Practice situations by imagining you're at a restaurant or meeting someone new and practice what you would say. One of my students, Sophie, felt blocked because she didn't have a speaking partner. I introduced her to self-talk, and she began practicing English every day whilst doing her morning routine. Over time, Sophie noticed that her confidence grew significantly, and speaking English felt much more natural. Third, use shadowing to push through obstacles. We've already discussed shadowing in previous sections, but it's such an effective technique that it deserves another mention. When you feel stuck, shadowing can help you continue moving forward. By listening to a podcast or story and repeating what the speaker says, you're practicing real conversation patterns without the pressure of creating your own sentences. Begin with short, simple sentences and gradually work your way up to longer conversations. Shadowing helps you build fluency because you're practicing both listening and speaking simultaneously. Plus, it helps you break through speaking blocks by providing the words and phrases you need to continue talking. Remember, you can find plenty of stories and podcasts to shadow on various platforms. These are excellent for practicing because they are designed for beginners and will help you build fluency systematically. Fourth, role-play challenging situations. Another brilliant way to break through speaking blocks is by role-playing difficult conversations. Think about the situations that make you feel most nervous, perhaps giving directions, having a job interview, or discussing a complicated topic. Practice these situations through role-playing until they become considerably easier. For example, if you're nervous about giving a presentation in English, practice giving that presentation aloud to yourself. Or if you're worried about having a conversation with a native speaker, role-play that situation in your mind. The more you practice these challenging scenarios, the more confident you'll feel when they occur in real life. Fifth, stay positive and persistent. Finally, breaking through speaking blocks requires a genuinely positive mindset. It's easy to become frustrated when things don't go perfectly, but remember this crucial point: progress is far more important than perfection. Every time you speak, you're improving, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. Celebrate the small victories, such as successfully completing a conversation or learning a new phrase. Here's a quote from Walt Disney that sums it up perfectly: "The difference between winning and losing is most often not quitting." If you continue practicing even when it feels challenging, you'll break through those speaking blocks and become a more fluent, confident speaker. Sixth, practice in real-life situations. One final way to break through speaking blocks is to practice speaking in genuine real-life situations. Go to places where you can use English cafes, markets, online language exchanges. The more you practice in real-world settings, the easier it becomes to push past the fear and hesitation. One of the best ways to practice in real life is by talking to native speakers. But what if you don't know any native speakers? Don't worry, there are plenty of online platforms where you can connect with people who want to practice English. Remember, they are learning too, so there's no need to feel embarrassed about making mistakes. Breaking through speaking blocks isn't about never making mistakes, it's about continuing even when it feels tough. With techniques like self-talk, shadowing, role-playing, and maintaining a positive attitude, you can overcome those moments of hesitation and start speaking more confidently. By now, you've learned how to break through speaking blocks with techniques like self-talk, shadowing, and role-playing. But what if you want to take your fluency even further? One of the best ways to do this is by practicing with speaking partners. Finding someone to speak English with, whether online or in person, can make a tremendous difference in your progress. But you might be thinking, what if I don't have anyone around me who speaks English? Don't worry, there are numerous ways to find speaking partners, and many of them are completely free and accessible from anywhere in the world. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. I genuinely hope this guide has added some excitement and practical value to your English learning journey. If you found it helpful or enjoyed reading it, please do share it with friends who might benefit. Your support and feedback truly inspire the creation of even better content. Remember, more exciting learning materials are always being developed to make learning English both easy and enjoyable. Keep practicing consistently, stay confident, and have an absolutely wonderful day ahead.